Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. It's a show where we take a look at some of these island games, Thursday night football, Monday night football, Sunday night football, for the DraftKings Showdown contest, and we kind of break down different angles of this game that might not be as popular with the field because we want to compete against 20% of the field, not 80% of the field. So we're going to try to pick a less likely outcome of this game that has a realistic possibility of happening. And we're going to try to build a game script around that angle. And the game we're looking at tonight is the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Minnesota Vikings. And the Eagles are 7.5-point favorites at home with a 48.5 total. And it's a good total. I think that's a pretty good total. Might be a little higher scoring than that possibly, but I think overall, the line there looks pretty good. The Eagles 7.5-point favorites. Now there's some narratives that have been going around with both of these teams for the past year or so. And the first one with the Eagles is that they are a great team and they have great coaching, and the Eagles are just a Super Bowl contender, which they were last year, and it makes sense that people think that they will be again this year. They look like the potential best team in the NFC apart from San Francisco. So the Eagles have a lot going for them right now. The Vikings are kind of the opposite. It's a tale of two teams. The Vikings did well last year as far as win total, but they don't get a lot of credit for those wins. I think a lot of people criticized the Vikings for being lucky last year, having things go their way. And the narrative this season is that regression is going to hit the Vikings and they're going to start losing a bunch of games this season. So, very well could happen. But we're going to try to take a look and question these narratives and try to build a game script around that. So I'm going to start with Philadelphia, and we've heard it for the past year. Like Nick Sirianni was a favorite to win Coach of the Year for a large portion of last season, and everybody was singing their praises about the Eagles and their winning ways and everything, which makes complete sense. But one thing that I noticed with Philadelphia, and I never really had I'm an Eagles fan. I never really had a whole bunch of confidence in Sirianni, based on a few of the just press conferences that he gave during his rookie season as a head coach. He just really didn't seem like he had everything together. It seemed like he was just kind of winging it on the job. And I really didn't have a lot of confidence in him. And last year, I think they got a little bit lucky with the way that the season schedule played out, because they ended up playing a bunch of easy teams. I think a lot of those teams were playing with backup quarterbacks too. And even in the championship game against the 49ers, they ended up, taking Brock Purdy out in the first quarter and forcing San Francisco to try to play against them with, third, fourth string quarterbacks. So there was really no hope for San Francisco to put up a fight in that game. So it was a really lucky, fortunate thing that happened for the Eagles, where they were able to kind of coast through that game and make it to the Super Bowl. They played well in the Super Bowl. You got to give them credit for that. They had a lot of time to prepare for it, and they performed really well, and they almost beat the Chiefs. So give them credit for that. But now we're looking at a different season. And one of the things that I noticed with Philadelphia in particular last year is they had a lot of trouble adjusting to unforeseen circumstances. And a couple of those circumstances were, first one, when their rookie run stuffer got hurt mid-season. They played the Washington Commanders that game, and they weren't able to come up with a solution to kind of plug that hole, right? They weren't able to adjust to that injury, And Washington took complete advantage of that situation, and they ended up just running the ball down Philly's throat. And the Eagles ended up losing that game, a game that they should have won, pretty handily. They ended up losing, and it was just a poor performance, poor adjustment by the coaching staff to win that game. So adversity hit, and they lost. Fast forward a couple games later, and Jalen Hurts gets hurt, and he's out for a few games. And all of a sudden, like the Eagles, they can't win a game. They couldn't win any games without Jalen Hurts. They couldn't adjust to that adversity, and they couldn't perform. They kept losing. It took for Jalen Hurts to come back in towards the end of the season, and Philadelphia had to pick up a couple, Ndamukong Suh and another guy to help out with the run defense before they were able to start winning games again. But they weren't able to adjust. Sirianni plummeted in the Coach of the Year favorites, and the reality kind of set in for what kind of coaching job he was doing against a really easy schedule of games. So fast forward to this week, week one, the Eagles lost a bunch of their secondary players in the defensive players in the secondary. And they are playing today without their starting running back, Kenny Gainwell, or at least he was the starting running back in week one. They're playing without James Bradbury, the cornerback, and they're playing without Nakobe Dean, who's a linebacker, and they're playing without free safety Reed Blankenship. So it looks like those guys are all out. And that's going to open up a huge weakness for the Eagles in the middle of their field. And we're going to see how Sirianni is able to adjust to that. And he's playing, he's coaching right now with a rookie offensive coordinator and a brand new defensive coordinator, because both of their Eagles coordinators are now head coaches with other teams. So Sirianni was really fortunate, I think, with the coordinators that he was working with the last couple of years in Philadelphia, to the point where now he's lost them both. He's on his own. And I give Harry Roseman a lot of credit for building the Eagles, the way that they're built. And they basically handed Sirianni a set of keys to a Mercedes, and they just told him, don't get it scratched. And now the autopilot feature on the Mercedes isn't working, and he's going to have to try to figure out how to drive, like a stick shift or something. So we're going to find out how the Eagles are able to adjust under Sirianni to this new circumstance, where they're in a situation where their secondary has been decimated, leaving a huge hole in the middle of their defense. They just got done playing the Patriots, and this kind of goes more again to the inexperience of the offensive coordinator. They didn't use Dallas Goedert, the tight end, and they didn't use DeAndre Swift, the running back, one of the running backs, at all in that game. They were both playing in that game, and neither of them got really targeted in that game, or caught any passes, or really did anything in that game. So that's partially on the offensive coordinator. Like, did they work them into the game plan? Like, what was going on? Why weren't these weapons getting used? And he got a lot of criticism, and the OC has said, throughout the week, that it's on him. He's gonna start using these guys more in these games, and we'll see what happens tonight in the Minnesota game. How much usage these guys get. Another wild card is Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny is a guy who was a healthy scratch last week. Penny is a big back. He's got a lot of burst, or at least he had a lot of burst before he got injured. He looked a little slow in the preseason, but not using him last week didn't make a whole lot of sense. They kept Boston Scott on the roster and made Rashad Penny a healthy inactive. So Penny is likely playing today. We haven't gotten the official starting roster or the official lineup for the Eagles for tonight. So we don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that Penny is going to play, and something with Penny could work to our advantage. We're going to take a look at some of these matchups and some of these potential angles that we can take on this game. The other side, Minnesota. We got a lot of narratives going around Minnesota. We got primetime Kirk Cousins. I haven't listened to a podcast without hearing about primetime Kirk Cousins. And, Cousins has had some struggles in primetime, but let's not forget he also has done well in primetime. He did well against the Patriots last year on Thanksgiving in a primetime spot. And everybody was talking up primetime Kirk, and turns out that Kirk outperformed, and the team ended up winning, and you ended up being in pretty good shape if you went against that narrative last season and actually went with the Vikings heavy lineup against the Patriots last year. So there's some narratives that we can kind of exploit today that go along those lines. The Vikings are missing or banged up on their offensive line. They have their center, Garrett Bradbury, looks like he's out, and Marcus Davenport, the offensive linebacker, and left tackle Christian Darrisaw look like they're hurt. We don't know officially what their status is yet. They could be out, but we're not sure on that just yet. But like the Eagles have a great pass rush too. They've always had like a good pass rush, and they just added Jalen Carter in the draft this year. They got a steal on Jalen Carter. He had some off-field issues where they were able to draft him pretty low in the draft and get a really good deal. I think they traded like a 4th round pick to move up in the draft to pick him up. But yeah, they got him, and he's looking like a stud based on last week's performance. And then they have all their other like normal studs. Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis was the rookie run stuffer, and Milton Williams. So the Eagles defense is ready to rock. They didn't get too much going against the Patriots last week. Patriots, Mac Jones actually ended up being, I think, like the highest scoring or the second highest scoring fantasy quarterback on the slate. And they almost beat the Eagles. They almost beat them. It came down to a play, towards the end of the game, where one of the Patriots receivers caught the ball out of bounds when they were making a drive down 5 points, and game was over because he couldn't toe tap the ball in. So they came very close to stealing that game from the Eagles. The narrative would be a lot different if they had been successful at that. But now here we are. The Eagles are 1-0. The Vikings are 0-1, and we are heading into week 2. So let's take a look at some of these options that we're going to have for building a lineup today. All right, so we got the highest owned guy is probably going to be Justin Jefferson, understandably. Jalen Hurts, he'll probably be highly owned. These guys are going to be highly owned in the captain spots. And A.J. Brown. So I think those three are probably going to be the highest owned captain options this week. And we can kind of take a look at where we can pivot off those guys and build a like a storyline, a game script, where those guys aren't going to be the highest scoring guys in the game tonight from a fantasy perspective. So gonna open up my lineup optimizers and I get some of my projections here as well. Let's see. So we're going to Minnesota and Philly. And from a projection standpoint, from what I have right now, it looks like highest projected player is Jalen Hurts, understandably. Then it goes Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Kirk Cousins, TJ Hawkinson, Devontae Smith, and Alexander Madison, and so on. So got a lot of good weapons in this showdown. There's a lot of good avenues that we could go for building this lineup. The avenue that I want to go is knowing the weakness in Philadelphia's secondary, like that middle portion of the secondary is going to be wide open. We're going to have a very inexperienced person filling in for Nakobe Dean. We're going to have a backup cornerback filling in for Bradbury to guard likely Jordan Addison. I'm assuming that Darius Slay is going to be shadowing Jefferson tonight. So he actually did a pretty good job on Jefferson in last year's game that they played against each other. He was able to more or less shut Jefferson down. So if Darius Slay has a repeat performance, that would be helpful with our storyline that we're going to build with the Justin Jefferson not performing as the captain in this game. So gonna start with plugging in TJ Hawkinson as the captain, because I think that he's going to benefit the most from the situation with the linebackers being out and the middle of the field being decimated for the defense for the Eagles. And I think that Hawkinson, he's one of the most talented pass catching backs in the NFL right now. And it's going to be a great opportunity for him to catch a lot of balls, because with the pressure that the Eagles should be able to get on Kirk Cousins with that banged up O-line versus that pass rush, I think that Cousins is going to need to kind of emulate what Mac Jones did last week and just be getting rid of the ball as soon as possible, because you're going to have to get rid of it in less than 3 seconds, so you're not getting sacked every play against these defenders, these pass rushers. So so we're going to be in a situation where Kirk Cousins is going to have to dump it off. I think the guy who's going to benefit the most is going to be TJ Hawkinson. And, he obviously has that upside as a pass catcher on top of that. So I'm having him go in the captain. I want to put Hurts in my lineup because I think, Hurts is going to be, potentially the highest raw scoring fantasy points in this game. We just don't want him to score too many that it's going to kill us if Hurts ends up being the captain. I like AJ Brown as well in this game. I'm going to plug him in for now. We can kind of work backwards with trying to figure out this lineup. I like Brown because Brown does the best when Jalen Hurts is under pressure. And they're going against Minnesota's defense, which blitzes a lot. Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator this year, and Minnesota, Flores has a history of blitzing at a very high rate, and they blitzed against New England last week at a very high rate. And the receiver who benefits the most when they're blitzing like that is AJ Brown. So I'm going to put AJ Brown in this lineup. I also like him as a potential captain, like if you want to go that direction with building out your script. But I'm putting AJ Brown in this lineup. So we got Hawkinson up top. We got Hurts and Brown. What other situation can help Hawkinson to be the highest scoring player on like the guy that needs to be captain for us to win this contest? I'm going to put in, let's see, I'm going to go down a little bit here. I'm going to put in Rashad Penny because I believe that Penny is going to be playing tonight. And I think the situation with these Eagles running backs, I think DeAndre Swift is more of a role-playing type of running back. Kenny Gainwell was more of a between the tackles grinder. With Swift, he's had trouble with like his running style. Like Detroit didn't like how he ran the ball, so they got rid of him. And now it seems like he's got like some issues with the Eagles coaching staff where they're just not giving him like the starting nod. And like there's something up with DeAndre Swift. All the analytics guys, we all like love DeAndre Swift, the fantasy players. We all love DeAndre Swift, but the coaches of the NFL, for whatever reason, they do not love DeAndre Swift. So, when given this opportunity to pick between Swift, Penny, and Scott, I'm going with Penny because I think Scott was active last week, just because he's a special teams guy. And, they wanted him on special teams, and, like Penny's relatively new to the team. So it makes sense that they would pick Boston Scott over Rashad Penny as far as guy that they would want in that lineup for week 1. So Penny basically got a week off last week. He's a between the tackles grinder too. And we just lost Kenny Gainwell, who is the the starting grinder. I don't think that they're going to do a 1-for-1 substitution of DeAndre Swift for Kenny Gainwell just based on their running styles and playing styles. I think that it would make more sense for a 1v1 switch would be to put Rashad Penny in for Kenny Gainwell. So I don't know that necessarily that'll mean that Penny is getting the bulk of carries, but I think he'll get a significant enough portion of those carries to justify his $1,600 price tag on DraftKings. I think that Penny could end up with 10 points tonight. He could get like a touchdown and 40 yards, something like that. Swift could also perform well if you wanted to add in another running back into this build. If you have Swift in there as well as Penny, and then you got Hurts, let's say that the Eagles are getting all their touchdowns on the ground. Hurts is passing to Brown and Swift. Those guys are racking up points from a PPR perspective, and then they're just rushing the ball and getting those touchdowns. And it's not, Hurts isn't getting a bunch of rushing touchdowns. He's getting more. Maybe he gets one and he throws like a passing touchdown to Brown. But the majority of the points going to Brown and Swift, we want kind of be PPR points. So they're getting like a lot of targets and receptions. And then maybe Penny comes in and he vultures like a touchdown or two. So that gets him in this lineup. So then that leaves us with Hawkinson, and we can put one more guy in this lineup. We got $12,200. So we could put Kirk Cousins. I'd want to put like another Vikings guy in this lineup. So if we have Hawkinson as the captain, maybe we put Kirk Cousins in there. That would give us an option there. Or we could do something a little bit different with this lineup. Maybe we get rid of Swift. Maybe there's another guy. Maybe we want Jefferson in there. So we would have Jefferson and Hawkinson in there, basically racking up these PPR points, these receptions. Jefferson's not exactly getting there with touchdowns. Maybe Hawkinson's getting the touchdowns, and that's what puts him over as that captain. And then on the other side, Hurts is getting vultured by Penny, and Brown is getting vultured by Penny, and Brown is getting enough receptions to get him in the optimal lineup, while Hurts is getting enough rushing yards and maybe passing yardage to get him in this optimal lineup, but not as the captain. So that leaves us with 3,800. Now that gives us a bunch of options here. Greg Joseph would kind of fit this build, another guy to steal those touchdowns away from Jefferson. So maybe when they're getting as opposed to Jefferson, these long bombs for touchdowns, maybe he's getting stopped short, and then Greg Joseph comes in and kicks a field goal. You also got the Vikings D. Jalen Hurts does not perform well under pressure. And he doesn't perform well under zone defense. And last week, Flores is typically a man coverage guy, but last week he used a lot of zone. So maybe he's going to adjust his game plan for Jalen Hurts, knowing that Hurts does not perform well under pressure or zone defense. And maybe he adapts the defense to that, and the defense is able to plug in here. Now, we've seen early in the season, it seems that a lot of these offenses have been sloppy, which would go with this narrative. I've talked up these defenses for basically every one of these shows that I've done, and we've hit on basically all of them. We hit on the what was the Monday game? Whoever the defense was on Monday, we hit on the defense against the Chiefs, and we hit on the defense against the Bills. So we've hit on a lot of these, and the Browns too. I think I had the Browns defense against the Bengals. So this just goes to play with the offenses kind of sputter out of the gate, because all sorts of stuff like less practice time, less performance in preseason games, stuff like that. There's a bunch of stuff that kind of came down in the last few years by the negotiations with the player union and all sorts of stuff like that, where these players are getting off these offensive players, at least, are just getting off to these slow starts because they can't really sync up with the offense. It's just not syncing up for them. So defenses have been coming out hot out of the gate. So I wouldn't rule out the Vikings defense in this game, just kind of run back, what we've been going with that's worked for us. I don't think the Vikings are nearly as talented a defense as the ones that we've started so far. The Jets were the big one. That was the big one that we had against the Bills. So I don't hate the idea of putting the Vikings in there. Boston Scott, he's another option if you wanted to add that second running back in there. He's at 2,200. Oliver, Josh Oliver, the tight end for the Vikings, is interesting. He had 3 targets last week. Looks like he scored 6 fantasy points. So, he'd be interesting in the situation that we were talking about, where Minnesota is going to be weak in the middle of the field, and that would definitely be a unique build in your lineup to put a guy like Oliver in there along with Hawkinson. I don't know if you would necessarily have Hawkinson as the captain with that build, because you don't want Oliver taking away too much work from Hawkinson when we need him to be putting up those points to get the captain spot. Other than that, not a whole lot that I like down in the cheap range here. If we wanted to kind of go a different build, let's say we wanted to do AJ Brown in the captain. Want to get Hurts. Want to get Jefferson and Hurts. It's going to be hard to get away from, just because of the amount of raw points that these guys get. Let's say we put in. Let's put in Rashad Penny in this one too, just because we want to kind of keep that that narrative going. And I want Hawkinson. I might just be locking in Hawkinson tonight. That confident in him. This would be more of a setup maybe to put in Oliver, because this situation you have Oliver and Hawkinson kind of taking those midfield points. Hurts isn't in the captain because maybe he's not rushing in any touchdowns, and Rashad Penny's rushing them in instead, and Brown is racking up all the PPR points and maybe touchdowns or whatever through the air. So there's a couple different ways that you can go with these lineups, but don't go necessarily with the narrative that the Vikings are just going to get rolled here, because I think that the Eagles offense is going to be struggling for a few weeks until this offensive coordinator can get his stuff together. And I think that the Vikings, with a talented defensive coordinator like Brian Flores, former head coach of the Dolphins, like he's a guy that can exploit a weakness like that. He doesn't really have the talent on the defense to work with, but he's got he can work his scheme to try to try to get lucky on some turnovers, or influencing the game and taking advantage of Hurts's weaknesses against pressure and zone coverage. So all sorts of stuff that can happen with when you look at it from that perspective. Don't feel like you have to lock in Hurts, Jefferson, any of these high-owned guys in captain. There's plenty of ways that this game can go. If you wanted to do Devontae Smith, let's say that maybe they're playing more zone coverage instead of man coverage. Devontae Smith is going to benefit more from zone coverage scheme by the defense. So let's say we wanted to go Smith, we plug in Hurts, let's plug in Jefferson, and then let's plug in Hawkinson. See if we can get where is he? We're going to get Rashad Penny in this one too. That leaves you with 4,300, which is a great spot, because that way you can get either kicker. You can get Swift in there. A lot of good things that you can do in this situation if you have Devontae Smith in as that captain. From an ownership perspective, in the captain spot, it looks like, let's see what his ownership projection is for the captain. It's let's see. Well, I don't have it. I don't have a projection for him yet, but I'm guessing that Devontae Smith would probably be right underneath AJ Brown in the captain spot as far as ownership. So I'll try and get that. I'll try and get a better idea of that. But in the meantime, maybe we try to, build another lineup, because I do like Alexander Mattison too. Alexander Mattison is basically going to be like a 3-down back, because I believe he played like 80 or 70% of the snaps, or over 70% of the snaps last week. And he didn't really have anyone else coming in to vulture any of his touches or take any of his touches away. And it kind of goes with that same angle that we're using with Hawkinson, in that Kirk Cousins is going to have to get rid of the ball quick. He'll probably be dumping off a decent amount to Madison. I think last year they played in week 2. Let's see what they did in week 2 last year. Last year in week 2, between the running backs, between Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison, there was 11 targets. So they passed a ton to those guys last season. And even Irv Smith, the tight end, even without these injuries, the midfield, Irv Smith, the tight end last year, had 8 targets. And then Adam Thielen, assume he was playing a decent amount, like in the slide. He was getting he got 7 targets. So yeah, you had these guys, Irv Smith, the tight end, and the running backs targeted last year, even without the injuries that the Eagles are dealing with. So if they take that same approach, last year the Vikings lost 24-7. So maybe this year it's a little bit different, and they end up having more success there. So, all right. So if we want to try to build a lineup with Madison involved, let's say it's that Hawkinson lineup. We want to put Hawkinson in the captain, and we want to use Alexander Madison. They're getting all these little dump offs and stuff. We want Hurts, and let's say we want Jefferson as well. That leaves us with 8,400, so 4,200 per person. Let's see. If we wanted to go this direction, it might make sense to. We wouldn't be able to plug in AJ Brown, so maybe this is one where we go with 2 of these running backs for the Eagles. So let's say we put Swift in there, so that way we got Hurts and Swift. We got 4,400 left. We got the Eagles D if we wanted to go that direction. Playing a captain from Minnesota against the Eagles D. If we wanted to go 4-2 build on the Minnesota side, we could go down to Greg Joseph. I think Greg Joseph would work in this build. We could go down to the Vikings D. Plenty of options. Like for ways that we could go with adding Minnesota guys in there. So I mean that's just a look at the types of angles that you can do if you don't go with that 4-2 Philadelphia build that everyone's going to probably be doing tonight. Try to get away from that. That's going to be a popular direction everyone goes in. Try to experiment with these captains a little bit. Hawkinson, if you're playing for a lower point scoring game, guys like Hawkinson work great. Like the kickers work great. The defenses always work in those situations. You can play the Eagles defense. You can play the Minnesota defense. Either one of those. If you really wanted to go crazy and make it a low scoring game, you could play both those defenses together, knowing that Hurts is vulnerable to the type of defense that the Vikings run, and knowing that the offensive line for the Vikings has been decimated. So if you plug in both those defenses, you can probably get a lot of studs in a lineup like that. Just make sure it makes sense the way that you're building it. But yeah, I'm thinking I'm liking Hawkinson the best as far as my captains. I put out a video earlier today with a breakdown of my 5 favorite plays from Showdown for tonight's slate, and you can check that out at Heat Seeker Sports on YouTube. You can see that in my shorts that I put up there. You follow us at Heat Seeker Sports on Twitter, and follow us on TikTok too at Heat Seeker Sports, and we will see you next time. Good luck, everybody. Leave your favorite plays in the comments. Who are you playing on this slate? Which direction do you think that this game is going to go? Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Tell me if you like coming up with which type of game scripts you like getting off the beaten path with. You want to compete with 20% of the field as opposed to 80% of the field when you're playing these big contests. You're playing cash games. You want to compete with 80% of the field as opposed to 20% of the field. So good luck, everybody. Leave your comments and do me a favor and subscribe to those channels and hit the like button. Good luck.